Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ready to go deep?
Always.
Awesome. Today, we're diving into the world of Bitcoin. Specifically, Satoshi Nakamoto's, the mysterious creator original white paper.
Oh, yeah, the OG Bitcoin document.
Exactly. We're going to unpack how Bitcoin aims to replace, all those traditional financial institutions for online transactions.
Oh, that's right.
Totally. We're talking about digital signatures, a chain of ownership, and this wild concept called proof of work to prevent, double spending.
It's a fascinating read, even today. Ahead of its time, really.
It really is. It almost feels like prophetic in some ways,
I get that. So the paper kicks off by tackling this problem we've all experienced with online payments. Reliance on those trusted third parties like banks.
The gatekeeper.
Yeah, exactly. The white paper highlights the weaknesses of this model, like reversible transactions, for example.
Oh, right. A double-edged sword, huh?
Totally. Offer consumer protection, but also potential for censorship, control even.
And don't forget the limitations on small transactions. Micropayments.
Huge potential there. Revolutionize online content, services, the whole thing.
It's like the internet was built for micropayments, but the financial system just hasn't caught up. So how does it address this?
Well, the white paper uses these words a lot. Decentralized and cryptographic.
Those are some big words.
They are the core of Bitcoin's innovation, though. Replacing trust with, get this, mathematical proof. Crazy, right?
Wow. Okay, so no more banks, but math.
Kinda. Relying on a whole network of participants to validate transactions instead of a central authority.
So less about who you trust and more about the system itself.
Exactly. It cuts out the middleman, reduces those pesky transaction costs, and opens the door to those microtransactions we talked about.
Okay, but let's zoom in a little. How does this work on a practical level? The white paper talks about an electronic coin being a chain of digital signatures. What does that even mean?
Picture this, a digital version of passing a physical coin hand to hand.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Each owner adds their signature to the coin's history, building this, chronological record of ownership.
Like a lineage for a coin.
Yes. And that's where cryptography comes in. It links each signature to the previous one. Tampering with it, well, almost impossible without getting caught.
So it's like a digital fingerprint that tracks the coin's whole journey. But if no central authority is verifying these signatures, how does the network stop someone from just, making copies and spending the same coin twice?
That is the double spending problem. One of the biggest challenges in creating a digital currency.
Tricky.
Right. Traditional systems rely on, a central mint,
Right.
They track and control the supply of coins. Bitcoin, different story. It tackles this through, a pretty ingenious combination of a timestamp server and proof of work.
Timestamp server, proof of work. Those are two terms I definitely need you to unpack.
You got it. Let's start with timestamp server.
Okay, hit me with it.
Think of it like a digital notary public. For blocks of transactions, the network takes a snapshot, right, of all the transactions happening at a specific time, bundles them into a block, and then Dotyor uses a cryptographic hash function to create a unique fingerprint for that block, like a digital fingerprint.
So it's like taking a group photo of all the transactions and giving it a unique serial number.
Exactly. Visualize it. But here's where it gets even cooler. Each timestamp includes the hash of the previous timestamp, creating a chain of blocks, a blockchain.
Oh, it's not just individual transactions being linked. It's like entire blocks of them all chained together, creating this unchangeable record.
You got it. Tampering with any part, you'd have to redo all the calculations for all the following blocks. Computationally, that's just impossible. But there's a vulnerability. What if someone wants to control the timestamp server itself and mess with the transaction order? That's where our friend proof of work steps in.
Okay, so we've got the chain of blocks, but we need a security guard for adding new blocks. Proof of work, what is it and how does it keep things secure?
Imagine a seriously complex math puzzle, one that needs major computing power to solve.
Okay, trying to imagine that.
That's essentially proof of work. Nodes, in the network, they compete to solve it. Whoever cracks it first gets to add the next block to the chain.
A race to crack a code. Winner gets to write the next chapter of Bitcoin's history. But wouldn't this just give an advantage to whoever has the most powerful computers?
True, computing power matters. But the system is designed to level the playing field. It adjusts the puzzle's difficulty, makes sure new blocks are added at a steady rate, regardless of the total computing power in the network.
So even if someone throws a ton of computing power at the problem, they can't just hijack the system.
Nope. The proof of work mechanism is like a security guard. Makes it way too expensive and difficult to mess with the blockchain.
This whole system is sounding like a complex, self-regulating organism. But if anyone can join the network, how does it actually function day to day? This is a global network we're talking about, right?
It is, and that's the beauty of Bitcoin's design. It's decentralized. Anyone can join. Just run a node on their computer.
A node.
Yeah, basically a small piece of the network. These nodes are constantly talking to each other, sharing new transactions, blocks, making sure everyone has the most up-to-date version of the blockchain.
Like a constantly updating spreadsheet shared across tons of computers worldwide.
That's it. And because it's spread out, it makes the network super resilient. One node goes offline, others just pick up the slack, like a self-healing organism, constantly adapting.
Pretty amazing. But here's a question. What's the incentive for people to actually run these nodes? To contribute their computer power to this big decentralized network? It can't just be altruism, right?
You're right. There's got to be a reason and incentive. And it's tied directly to that proof of work thing we were talking about. Remember the race to solve that crazy puzzle?
Yeah, the winner gets to add the block.
They also get a reward. Newly created Bitcoins.
Ah, so there's a financial incentive to keep the network secure. Like a digital gold rush where miners get rewarded for their effort.
Exactly. That reward, plus transaction fees paid by users, keeps nodes honest. It's way more profitable to play by the rules.
Makes sense. So we've covered how Bitcoin tackles the limits of traditional financial systems, the whole blockchain and proof of work thing, and what keeps the network going. But with this ever-growing chain of blocks, doesn't that create a massive amount of data? How does Bitcoin handle all that information?
That's a great question. And the white paper has some clever solutions for that. Efficiency and prioritizing key information is the name of the game. Instead of storing, like, every single detail of every single transaction, the system uses a special data structure called a Merkle tree.
Merkle tree? Sounds intriguing. What is that, and how does it help manage all this information?
Picture a family tree, but instead of people, it's transactions. The Merkle tree summarizes all the transactions in a block, but efficiently. Only the root of the tree, which is a summary of all those transactions, is included in the block header. And that header is what goes on the blockchain.
So it's like a compressed file. Keeps the important stuff without all the bulk.
Exactly. This process, it's called pruning. It lets nodes save space without messing with the blockchain's integrity. Old transactions are still verifiable. They're just not stored in full detail by every node. Pretty smart, right?
That is clever. Manages the growing blockchain while keeping it secure. But what about users who don't want to run a full node and store the whole blockchain? Can they still, participate in the network and verify transactions?
Totally. The white paper calls it Simplified Payment Verification, SPV. Lightweight clients, they can verify transactions without downloading the whole blockchain. They just need the block headers, which have those Merkle roots we were talking about.
So like having a map of the main roads without needing to know every single side street and alleyway, you can still get where you need to go.
Perfect analogy. It opens up Bitcoin to way more users even if they don't have tons of storage or processing power.
Love it. We've talked about combining transactions into blocks, but what if someone wants to send like an amount that doesn't match a whole Bitcoin? Can they break down and combine Bitcoins for more specific transactions?
Absolutely. Bitcoin has this smart system of inputs and outputs within each transaction. Think of it like your personal finances. You have money coming in from different sources, like your salary, gifts, maybe investments. Those are your inputs. Then you've got expenses, rent, food, fun stuff. Those are your outputs.
So a Bitcoin transaction, it can have multiple inputs and outputs, just like our own bank account.
Precisely. Let's say you want to send half a Bitcoin to a friend, but you only have two previous transactions, one for 0.3 and another for 0.4. You can use both as inputs to your new transaction, combining them to get that 0.5 Bitcoin.
And what about the extra 0.2?
That's where the outputs come in. One goes to your friend with the 0.5, and the other, with that leftover 0.2, comes back to you as change.
It's like paying for coffee with a $10 bill and getting change back.
Exactly. This input-output system makes transactions of any amount possible, making Bitcoin really versatile.
Well thought out. Okay, we've covered a lot of technical ground here. But with all this activity happening publicly on the blockchain, how does Bitcoin handle privacy?
Important question, especially for a system that's trying to change finance as we know it. While transactions are public, Bitcoin uses public and private keys to protect users' identities. Think of it like email.
Okay, go on.
Your public key is like your email address. You share it to receive Bitcoin. But your private key, that's like your password, keeps it secure and authorizes transactions.
So anyone can send you Bitcoin, but only you can access it.
Exactly. The transaction details are public, but who's sending and receiving? That's hidden.
Kind of like sending a postcard, but with no return address. But the white paper did mention that perfect privacy is tough in a public system. Are there any situations where privacy could be at risk?
Yeah, you've got to be smart about it. Multi-input transactions are one example. If someone uses Bitcoins from different sources that are linked to them in a single transaction, it creates a trail. That could potentially reveal their identity.
It's like trying to stay anonymous by wearing a disguise, but then using pieces from your everyday wardrobe to create it. People might start to recognize those individual pieces.
Exactly. While Bitcoin offers more privacy than traditional systems, it's not completely anonymous. You have to be mindful.
Understood. Privacy is complex. We've talked about the decentralized network and proof of work, but how secure is Bitcoin, really? What if someone with a ton of computing power tries to rewrite the blockchain?
That's the big question, right? Satoshi Nakamoto actually addressed that in the white paper. Nothing's 100% foolproof, but Bitcoin relies on the idea of majority consensus. The network is constantly verifying transactions and adding new blocks.
Right, like checking and double-checking a ledger over and over.
Yes, and that's where the decentralized network comes in. For someone to manipulate the blockchain, they'd need to control most of the computing power. They'd have to outpace all the honest nodes that are constantly verifying transactions.
So it's like a democracy where the majority rules. As long as most of the nodes are honest, the network stays secure.
That's the idea. The white paper uses this concept, a binomial random walk, to explain how likely an attack is to succeed.
Binomial random walk. That sounds complicated.
It's simpler than it sounds. Think of it like a race. Each step forward is a new block added to the blockchain. The honest nodes, with their combined power, are taking more steps forward, extending the legitimate chain. An attacker is trying to catch up, but they fall further behind with every new block.
So it's like trying to outrun a train that's constantly getting faster.
Exactly. The more blocks added to the legitimate chain, the more difficult it becomes for an attacker to catch up. It's a race they're destined to lose.
That's reassuring. So attacks might be possible in theory, but practically speaking, they're almost impossible to pull off.
That's the key takeaway. Bitcoin's security actually increases over time. More participants, more computing power, more security. Pretty clever, right?
Incredibly clever. This has been an amazing breakdown of how Bitcoin works.
We've only scratched the surface.
I know, right? There's so much more to explore, like the impact Bitcoin is having on the world, both in finance and beyond.
The ripple effect is massive.
It is. So let's shift gears and talk about the impact Bitcoin is having, the challenges, the opportunities, the whole shebang.
Let's do it. Welcome back to our deep dives into Bitcoin. It's wild to think, this tech, born from a white paper, could reshape our entire financial system.
It's a real paradigm shift. Reminds me of the early internet days, when people were just starting to, grasp its potential.
The parallels are definitely there.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, like the early internet, totally disruptive.
Yeah. And just like the internet faced pushback in the beginning.
Oh, absolutely. Skepticism, resistance, the whole 9 yards.
Remember when people thought email was a fad?
It's crazy to think about now.
It really is. Makes you wonder what we're dismissing today that'll be essential tomorrow, right?
It does.
Speaking of challenges, what about the whole regulatory landscape around Bitcoin? It seems like governments and central banks are still figuring things out.
That's a big one. Bitcoin's decentralized nature, which is a huge strength, it also creates, regulatory headaches. Governments like control, right?
Yeah.
Over currency, financial systems, the whole thing.
And Bitcoin kind of throws a wrench in that.
Totally disrupts it. So it makes sense that regulators are treading carefully.
It's like fitting a square peg in a round hole. Existing regulations just weren't made for a decentralized digital currency. What needs to happen, for clearer regulations to emerge?
Education, collaboration, a willingness to adapt, I'd say.
Right.
Regulators need to understand Bitcoin, the good and the bad. The Bitcoin community, we got to engage with policymakers, provide insights. And ultimately, I think we need new regulatory frameworks, ones that work for cryptocurrencies.
It's almost like we need a whole new legal specialty, cyber law, but for money.
Right. But regulations aside, what other challenges are holding Bitcoin back from wider adoption?
I'm thinking scalability. Bitcoin's blockchain can only process so many transactions per second. As more people use it, won't that cause network traffic jams, higher fees?
You're spot on. It's a problem with traditional systems too, Everyone trying to use it at once. Bottlenecks.
Like everyone trying to merge onto the highway at rush hour?
That's the perfect analogy. So there's a lot of work happening to make Bitcoin more scalable. Remember those layer 2 solutions? Like the Lightning Network.
Yeah, kind of like express lanes on that crowded highway.
Exactly. It takes a lot of those transactions off-chain. Only settles on the main blockchain now and then. Makes things faster.
Smart. And there's also work being done to make the core protocol itself more efficient. Right?
Absolutely. But those changes, they need careful consideration and consensus from the Bitcoin community. Not so easy.
Right. It's all about finding that balance, innovation, while keeping the network secure and trustworthy. It's not like a company where a CEO just, makes changes on a whim.
Definitely not. It's a community effort.
It is. Okay, enough about challenges. Let's talk opportunities.
Yep.
Where do you see Bitcoin fitting into the current financial landscape? Where's the biggest potential?
Financial inclusion is huge. Billions of people globally, they lack access to banking.
Oh, yeah. A massive underserved population.
The coin can empower them, gives them control over their finances, access to the global system, all without those traditional gatekeepers.
Democratizing finance, breaking down those barriers.
Exactly, and it's not just for individuals. Think about cross-border payments. The current system, slow, expensive, and so complicated. Bitcoin streamlines it. Faster, cheaper, more efficient.
I've been there. Sending money internationally is a nightmare. Takes forever. The fees are outrageous.
Bitcoin changes the game for individuals, businesses, anyone who deals with cross-border transactions.
That's game-changing. I'm also seeing more buzz from institutional investors. People see Bitcoin as a potential hedge against inflation, a store of value like gold.
It's an emerging asset class, attracting the big players. More institutional money flowing in means more liquidity, more stability, hopefully.
So it's not just for everyday spending. It's becoming this serious financial asset. But we can't ignore the environmental concerns, right? All that mining uses a lot of energy.
You're right. It's a valid concern, and the Bitcoin community is working on it. Mining's energy use is often compared to entire countries, and that sounds scary, but you got to consider the context.
Right.
The traditional financial system, all those data centers, bank branches, ATMs, they use tons of energy too.
It's easy to focus on Bitcoin because it's new, disruptive. We forget about how inefficient the old systems are.
Exactly. And it's not a static situation. People are working to make mining more efficient. Renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro.
Greener Bitcoin mining.
Right. There's also research into new consensus mechanisms. Those could reduce the energy needed to secure the network.
So it's an ongoing process. The environmental impact is real, but it's not a dead end. We're finding more sustainable solutions as we go.
I agree. I'm optimistic about the future of sustainable Bitcoin mining.
Me too. This has been a really eye-opening look at the challenges and opportunities for Bitcoin. But I want to go even deeper. Beyond the tech, the economics, what about the philosophical side of things, the societal implications? This whole decentralized, trustless system makes you think about power,
It really does. Bitcoin challenges some core assumptions about how we, organize ourselves as a society. We've always relied on these centralized institutions, governments, banks, big corporations. They control so much, including our money. Bitcoin offers something different.
A world where power is more distributed, individuals have more autonomy?
That's the vision.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've really gotten into the nitty-gritty of Bitcoin, haven't we?
We have the tech, the economics, the whole 9 yards.
Right. But now I'm kind of feeling philosophical. This whole idea of a decentralized, trustless system makes you think, about power.
It really does. It challenges centuries of thinking about how we organize ourselves. Governments, banks, corporations.
Powers that be.
Exactly. They've always been in control, especially when it comes to our money. But Bitcoin offers a different path.
A path where power is more.
Right.
That's spread out, more in the hands of individuals.
Yeah, more autonomy, more freedom. That's the big idea.
It's definitely appealing. But I gotta admit, it's a little scary, too, Moving away from those familiar structures, it's like stepping into the unknown.
I get that. It's a big change, but change can be good, right?
Of course. But every coin has two sides. What are the, potential risks and benefits of this whole decentralization thing?
Well, the folks who are really into decentralization, they argue it makes things more resilient, more room for innovation, more freedom, obviously. A decentralized system, it's harder to break, less vulnerable to attacks,
That makes sense.
And it lets people experiment and come up with new solutions without needing permission from some central authority.
No gatekeepers. I like that.
Right. And it gives individuals, direct participation. No more relying on middlemen.
It's like the difference between a monoculture and a diverse ecosystem.
Oh, I like that. Explain it.
Well, a monoculture, it's efficient, but if a disease hits or the environment changes, the whole thing collapses. A diverse ecosystem. It's messier, less predictable, but way more resilient in the long run. Adaptable.
That's a brilliant analogy. It's exactly what we see with the internet, right? Decentralized design, explosion of creativity, innovation. None of that would have happened with a more controlled system.
True. It's like the Wild West of ideas out there.
Yeah.
But even the Wild West had its downsides. What about the risks of, too much freedom, decentralization taken too far?
Right. There's always a balance. Decentralization can lead to fragmentation. Things can become disorganized, hard to coordinate. It's tough to implement changes or address system-wide issues.
Yeah, if everyone's going their own way.
Exactly. And it can also create opportunities for bad actors, people who want to exploit the system. Think about the early days of the internet, all those scams, security breaches. It took time to figure out the safeguards, establish those norms.
So it's not a perfect solution. There are challenges,
Yeah.
but also a huge potential for positive change.
Exactly. And that's a conversation we need to have as a society. How do we balance individual freedom with, collective responsibility? How do we build systems that are strong but also flexible? That's what Bitcoin makes us think about.
It's like we're pioneers, building a new world from scratch. We got to learn from the past, be aware of the risks, and work together to make something better.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And this brings us to another big idea Bitcoin brings up. Trust. We're so used to trusting those centralized institutions. With our money, our data, our identities, Bitcoin proposes something completely different. Trust based on math, on consensus.
So instead of trusting a bank to keep our money safe, we're trusting a network of computers and some complex math equations. That's a huge shift.
It is. And this shift, it could go way beyond just finance, Imagine a world where you can check if information is real, if supply chains are legit, if online identities are authentic, all without relying on some central authority.
Whoa. That's a whole different level of trust.
It is. And blockchain tech, the foundation of Bitcoin, that's what can make it possible.
It's like moving from blind faith to verifiable truth. You can see the evidence for yourself.
Exactly. It creates transparency, accountability.
Yeah.
But it also raises questions about privacy, about control. If everything's on a public blockchain, how do we protect sensitive info? Who gets to see this data? How do they use it?
It's that balance again. Security versus privacy. We want to be safe from fraud, but we also want to protect our information, our right to privacy. It's complicated.
It is. And there aren't easy answers. But these are the conversations we need to have as we explore the potential of blockchain tech, how it'll impact society.
Totally agree. It's a powerful tool, but like any tool, it can be used in different ways. It's up to us as a society to guide its development, to make sure it benefits humanity.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, last philosophical question before we wrap up. Bitcoin, it makes us rethink not only trust, but value itself. We've always relied on, governments and central banks to say what our money is worth, to back it up. But Bitcoin, its value seems to come from the network itself, from the people who use it, believe in it. How do we make sense of that?
That's a question that's been debated for ages, right? What makes something valuable? Is it the object itself, or is it just what we believe? Bitcoin adds a whole new layer to that discussion. It's digital. No intrinsic value, really. But it's gained real market value purely because people believe in it. Because of the network it's created.
It's like the value of a social network, right? It's not the tech itself, it's the connections, the community.
Exactly. Bitcoin's value comes from its utility, sure. You can use it to buy things. It's scarce, it's secure. But it's also about its, social and cultural significance, the story people tell about it.
It's like a digital gold rush. We're not digging up gold, we're mining for Bitcoin. And the value comes from that scarcity, but also from the belief that it has a future.
It's really fascinating. It makes us rethink everything we thought we knew about value, especially in this digital age.
It really does. This has been an amazing journey. We started with a simple white paper about digital cash and ended up talking about the very fabric of our society. Decentralization, trust, value, power.
Bitcoin really is more than just a technology, isn't it?
Way more. It's like a catalyst for change. It's forcing us to think differently about the world, about ourselves.
And I think the biggest takeaway here is that the future is, it's not set in stone. We have a choice in how we shape this technology, the world it's creating.
So true. And to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something new, challenged your assumptions, maybe even got a little inspired to join this conversation about the future of finance, tech, society. It's all connected. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those minds open to new possibilities.